Have you ever wondered what makes an MLB team a playoff contender? We used data to find out exactly that. Our research question was simple. Which team statistics best predict whether an MLB team makes the playoffs? We focused on three key areas: scoring margin, hitting power, and pitching quality, with the goal of finding the single best stat that separates playoff teams from everyone else. To do this, we pulled data from Fangraphs using a Python package called PyBaseball, covering all 30 MLB teams across 8 seasons. That gave us 240 total team season observations, and about 35% of those teams made the playoffs in any given year. The three main stats that we focus on were run differential per game, OPS, and ERA. These three stats together tell the story of a team's offense, pitching, and overall balance.
For our ADA, we looked at three different metrics, which are the ones you see on screen here. And for each of them, we plotted a histogram showing playoff teams in blue and non-playoff teams in red. The first histogram of run differential per game shows a clear divide between blue teams and red teams, meaning that this is a strong indicator for playoff qualification. There's a total, it shows that playoff teams score about 1.17 more runs per game than non-playoff teams, which totals out to about 190 more runs per season than non-playoff teams. The other two metrics, OPS and ERA, they have much more overlap. Their distributions are much more closer together, meaning that they are weaker than run differential per game in determining playoff qualification. And they also show that heavy hitting and heavy hitting is not enough. Elite offense is not enough to get you to the playoffs. You need a good pitching staff as well.
Our biggest finding is in these box plots. Playoff teams outscore opponents by 0.74 runs per game. Non-playoff teams get outscored by negative 0.43. That 1.17 run swing every game adds up to a roughly 19 win difference over a full season. And look at the ERA. Playoff teams sit at 3.78 versus 4.41. That's a gap of almost two-thirds of a run per 9 innings. OPS, just 0.035 apart. You can still hit well and still miss the October if your pitching is bad. The heat map confirms the same hierarchy across every stat. Run differential leads at 0.074, correlation with making playoffs. ERA is negative 0.61. Strong pitching is basically a prerequisite. OPS trails at 0.52. And that's the core takeaway. Pitching matters more than hitting. The ERA gap between the playoff and the non-playoff teams is 18 times larger than the OPS gap. Great offense cannot compensate for a weak pitching staff. The path to the postseason is in the pitching.
Looking at outliers from our EDA, we can see that there were no outliers in the run differential per game metric, meaning that teams who had a dominant run differential always made the playoffs, and vice versa. Teams that didn't never made the playoffs. That's a good sign. That shows us that it is a strong indicator for playoff qualifications. Whereas in OPS, there were some teams that made the playoffs with not so much of a high hitting percentage. And ERA doesn't have any outliers either, which means that weaker teams with weaker pitching almost always means no playoffs.
Another analytical approach that we used was it's called linear regression, and what you do in this is just chart up one variable against another variable, and to create this perfect line. So the variables that we did were the actual wins of the teams versus the predicted wins, and then the predicted wins are determined using a training algorithm uh, that the machine learns throughout the collection of the data and everything. And so as you can see, the actual wins is close to the predicted wins. The points are close to the actual line, which means that this was actually a good model for determining whether or not teams would do well. And the stats that we determined were best did in fact determine a lot of the wins: the OPS, the run diff game, and then the ERA.
Our project was about finding what stats help MLB teams make the playoffs. We used data from 2015-2023 and focused on three stats: run differential per game, OPS, and ERA. The main thing we found is that the run differential per game is the most important. Teams that score more runs than they allow are much more likely to make the playoffs, and this was very clear in our graphs. We also saw that ERA matters a lot, which shows pitching is important. Teams with lower ERA usually made the playoffs more often. OPS, which measures hitting, did matter, but it was weaker and there were more overlap between teams. Our hypothesis was that better overall team performance leads to playoff success, and we were correct. Teams that are good in both offense and defense perform the best. A common method we could use is regression analysis. This means using stats like run differential, OPS, and ERA to predict if teams make the playoffs. Based on our results, run differential would have the biggest impact. ERA would be next, and OPS would have smaller impact. This helps show us how much each stat matters. Some drawbacks are that our data set is just too small and only uses team stats, so it doesn't include things like injuries or player level data. Overall, we learned that balanced teams do best, and run differential is the strongest stat for predicting playoff success.